You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
It is Sons of the Shoe, a post-game episode of the show with Spencer German. No Nick for me tonight, unfortunately, but we'll have plenty of reaction to tonight's game when we connect later in the week for our preview episode leading into week 3, which I guess is a bye week, so we don't have to necessarily preview too much, but I'm sure he'll have some good thoughts on things when we connect back with him. In the meantime, you get me. And was anybody else, were they losing you a little bit at the end? I don't mean like in terms of like not wanting to cheer for the Buckeyes or not entertainment value. I just mean it was getting late. It was like 10:15. I started dozing a little bit. I was like, I got to make it to the end of this game so I can do this show. But a solid win for the Buckeyes nonetheless. They shut out Western Michigan 56-0. It was exciting in a number of ways, despite it being sort of a snooze fest of a score. So much so that it nearly put me asleep and maybe others. But all around dominant effort from the Buckeyes. I do want to remind you, as we tend to do when we start the show, to like, follow, subscribe, comment at the 92 Through the Fan YouTube channel, but do all those other things I mentioned wherever you get your podcast to Sons of the Shoe. Still relatively new, coming up on a year old here, and very much looking forward to covering the Ohio State Buckeyes season with you guys each and every single week as Nick Wilson and I break it all down for you. Have some fun in the meantime. But we're going to have a lot of fun tonight because outside of this game, it was an eventful day in college football. A lot to get to there, but obviously I want to start with the topic at hand, which was just how dominant the Buckeyes looked tonight in this win over Western Michigan. Again, your final score 56-0. But it goes beyond that. Like if you're just doing the box score watching thing and you pull up the numbers here, it's obvious. It's easy to see why Ohio State won and how they won when you almost go 600 plus yards more in total offense than your opponent. 683 yards Ohio State put up to Western Michigan's 99 yards. They had 410 passing yards to Western Michigan's 71, and they gave up just 28 rushing yards while rushing for 273 yards on the ground themselves. They had 30 first downs. They were only 3 of 10 on third down. Not their best efforts on third down. 2 of 2 on fourth down, though, which is something we'll get to a little bit later in the show. Some ballsiness from Ryan Day early in the season, which was good to see. And they scored, by the way, 6 rushing touchdowns tonight in a number of different iterations, from Quinshon Judkins doing it twice, Travion Henderson. You had James Peoples back in the fold. He had a touchdown tonight, and Will Howard scoring a rushing touchdown as well, with that ever important elusiveness that we continue to talk about being an important factor of his game and what he kind of brings to the table as the quarterback in this team. A number of different directions we can go, though. And I think I just want to start with the fact that Nick and I had our conversation leading up to this game in the previous episode of the show, where we had some concerns just about this offensive line coming out of the Akron game. Akron had some dudes that deserve some respect up front of their defensive line, and we noted that. Nunnally was a guy, we threw out his name among others, but it was a little concerning as you're still kind of waiting for Donovan Jackson to get back in the fold here. Obviously, it was a little concerning that they weren't getting sort of that forward push, that downfield push, and it seemed like the run game just never really got its momentum in week 1 the way that you would have hoped for. Nick even mentioned specifically with Quinshon Judkins, like Travion Henderson's more of like your elusive guy who can make you miss in a phone booth. Quinshon Judkins is like that, I just want to get downhill and run. And we saw that on full display tonight, which is what I want to get to here. But that was in large part his success tonight, his effectiveness tonight. And the fact that he rushed for 108 yards on 9 attempts, 2 touchdowns, as I mentioned, it was all give credit to the offensive line tonight. That group was fantastic, as they should be, against an inferior opponent like Western Michigan, and an opponent that we talked about having. Western Michigan is a very senior upperclassman laden team. We highlighted that in the episode earlier this week. But up front on the defensive line, they replaced a lot of guys on that portion of the lines of their team specifically. And so we highlighted that as an area that Ohio State had to exploit in this game. And we felt like if the offensive line can exude itself and exude their will on Western Michigan in the trenches, yes, it would be a good sign. But that was an area that we thought would be something they could do, something they could attack, and that it would lead to the run game success, which played out in real time. So we highlighted that, and it came to fruition that there was a clear emphasis on like, hey, we're just going to bully these guys up front. We're going to own them. We're going to get that forward push, and we're going to open up some lanes for Henderson, for Judkins, for Howard, even in some instances to run through and break off some massive plays tonight that obviously was the biggest reason why they won. We talk about Ohio State not being – I want to actually real quick, I do want to highlight specifically Josh Fryer. You're the right tackle for the Buckeyes, because there was a couple plays where he was pulling zone run option or zone run plays, excuse me. It's late. I apologize. Where he was kind of lead blocking for Quinshawn or Travion or whatever it might be, or whoever it might be. And he was getting downfield and just like attacking dudes and pancaking them on their ass upfield. And this is why I want to hit on this, because that's the type of stuff that even in games last year against inferior opponents, it just didn't feel like the Buckeyes were bringing to the table. It was why in the back of our minds, like we'd watch these games and we would just feel like it was almost like the Michigan game was the next game on the schedule, because you were constantly in the back of your head like, I don't know, man, like something just didn't look right about the way that they won that game. They were winning the games and they were beating the inferior opponents in front of them. But there was always just something weird about the way that it played out. They weren't getting their rushing attack just didn't seem as effective. Didn't seem like they were really able to like exude themselves and really like enforce the fact that they were the better team, the more talented team up front. And that was it allowed the doubts about the Michigan game to creep in weeks like this, week 1, week 2, week 3, weeks where we should be thinking about the next team on the schedule and what's kind of, what's in front of them, rather than just looking too far ahead to Michigan. But it was already starting to come in where we had doubts about how they were going to beat that team, because they just didn't seem like they could dominate in the trenches that way. And so that was the one thing. In these matchups against inferior opponents, MAC schools, whatever, you are looking for Ohio State to really show we are the better team. We know we're the better team. And like you're looking for little things, little indicators, little, things that show us they're making progress from one week to the next. And we saw that, I think, in spades tonight up front, in the way that the offensive line played, in the way that the offensive line dominated. And it created everything that you saw on display tonight, with 273 rushing yards, Quinshawn Judkins over 100, the 600 yards of total offense. I mean, even in the passing game, they were giving Will Howard a ton of time to drop back and throw. He's not always going to have that time, once we get into these games against Oregon and others. But, it was good to see him kind of get comfortable and make some plays as well, but also for that run game to really establish the identity of this team. Because I think that's important now moving forward. You got the bye, then you get Marshall, and then you start getting into Big Ten play with Michigan State, and then Iowa to follow. This is like a building block game. I hope, I pray, and I hope for the offensive line to build some momentum in terms of what they're able to do up front, and show that, the last couple of years, maybe they were out physical by a team like Michigan, or they weren't the most physical group, but that's different this year. That's why these games matter for those players, and in terms of just building good habits, or establishing good habits, building some momentum. And the hope is that can kind of carry over as they build confidence into matchups here coming down the docket, and obviously your bigger matchups on the docket once you get to Oregon in the middle of October. So like that was one of the biggest things I was paying attention to, was the offensive line push. And given how effective the running backs were tonight, and Will Howard as a runner, it was obvious that group dominated in a number of different areas, in a number of different ways. I thought Chip Kelly utilized the playbook really well in allowing those guys to make plays, especially in the zone run type stuff, outside and inside. And that was super effective. There was clearly an emphasis to get that run game going. And that's another reason why I think this is going to be super important, because I understand where people still have some doubts about Will Howard. I don't know that 2 weeks against MAC schools is going to answer all the questions that people might have. There were some bad throws tonight from Will Howard. We'll get to that here in a second. There were also some really, really impressive throws and some really good moments from him as well. But you get this run game going the way it did tonight. And it was similar to like last year going into the Michigan game. Travion Henderson had been hurt. He came back. And you felt like they started to find their identity as a run heavy team, or that they could run the football a little bit. And you felt like that could have been something that was the difference in a game against Michigan last year. To have that starting to roll already this early in the season is encouraging, and it's what you want to see if you're an Ohio State fan. So, and I think that they plan on relying on that, two-headed monster in the backfield of Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson as kind of their bread and butter. Something that they can go to when they're in a tight spot, that, something they can fall back on to sort of reset things and settle things down and get Will Howard comfortable. So that's why a game like tonight mattered. And that's why I think seeing that run game really get going mattered. We finally got to see, as I know Nick was very disappointed that we didn't get to see Quinshon Judkins kind of get unlocked from last week against Akron. We saw that tonight. And there's another player that's very unfair, which we're getting here in the comments. I know, Radu, you threw it out there. I want to get to Jeremiah Smith coming up in the next segment. But we saw tonight how dangerous Quinshon Judkins is in his own right, and how that dude is unfair as well. I mean, you gave him holes that he could run through, just get downhill and go, and he was gone. It was 3 yards in a cloud of dust, untouched to the end zone. That dude is special. Travion obviously made his presence felt. We've known for the last couple of years what he can do. And I love the fact that they got Will Howard working as a runner as well, and able to kind of establish him as a running threat a little bit more than maybe they did in week one tonight too. 18-26, 292 yards and a touchdown passing for Will Howard, 69% completion percentage. I know what everyone's going to point to. They're going to point to the egregious underthrow of Jeremiah Smith in the first half. I understand, and I was right there with you. Ugly, ugly throw when you had the amount of time that he had to. How do you not get that ball out in front and get Jeremiah Smith to go out and chase it? I'm willing to give some grace in this period of time that we're in the schedule, where there's still, he's still getting himself a little bit comfortable and figuring some things out. You'd rather he make that mistake now than in a dire situation or a dire game where a lot more is on the line against an Oregon or a Michigan or whatever it might be. And I thought what was interesting was like the way he responded after that. And this was something I don't think we saw from Kyle McCord last year. It was like every drive with Kyle McCord, it was very tense. It was like, well, what's he going to do this time? He didn't really know. And I understand people might want to jump in the comments, and people are going to probably throw in the comments that Kyle McCord's had another great game today for Syracuse. Great, fine, okay. Different bar when you're at Syracuse than when you're at Ohio State. And he wasn't living up to that bar. And I think what's interesting is like you didn't know what you were going to get any given series from Kyle McCord. With Howard, you feel like he can clean the slate and come back out and deliver. And that very next series, after the underthrow to Smith, he came out and threw a beautiful precision point pass to Emeka Egbuka on kind of a corner route to the sideline that I thought was beautiful. And it was like, I don't know if I tweeted at the time, but it was a thought I had in my head of like, okay, he's forgiven for the error of his ways and the underthrow to Jeremiah Smith. Even though that one probably would have been a touchdown and this one wasn't, it was still one of those things where it was like, dude, he forgot about it, moved on, and made an immediately like another great throw going towards the sideline to Emeka Egbuka, where you just felt like, okay, he's good. He got it. No worries. And you were on your merry way with this team just continuing the blowout that they did, that they put on Western Michigan. And I think if for a game this early in the season against a MAC school we saw tonight from the offense, what you were hoping to see. Let's talk some more. We got to take a break, but let's talk some more about the defense and what we saw from that group tonight, pitching a shutout, some really impressive things on that side of the ball. And, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't get to him, Jeremiah Smith putting another tremendous performance on tape as he continues what I think has to be at this point definitively the best 2 games of any rookie in Ohio State history in terms of a debut and the numbers that he's put up. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get back, but real quick, got to pause as you get a quick word from our sponsors. All right, guys, welcome back into Sons of the Shoe with Spencer German. Nick Wilson not with me tonight. He had a family obligation, but I'm sure he'll have plenty of thoughts on tonight's game, what went well for the Buckeyes. I'm going to be honest. I am bringing back in the final segment, those of you who have been loyal listeners since the beginning of the show, we, during the season, in our post-game edition of the show, like to do a segment called Like It, Love It, and Leave It. It was hard to come up with something I wanted to leave tonight. There was a lot of good, not a lot of bad. And so I was really splitting hairs to come up with something. But you'll hear that coming up in the final segment. We also have the Michigan Panic Meter, which I'm assuming you guys know where I'm going to go with it when Michigan gets blown out by Texas the way that they did. But that also ties in, that game specifically, I think, ties into a question that I have and some other massive games that went on and played out in college football today. Before we get to all that, though, I do have to stay with the offense for a moment to just highlight Jeremiah Smith for the second consecutive week, guys, because we're in week 2 of the season, and I think we're already out of superlatives to describe this guy. He is a bona fide freak. He is insane. He is a monster. You know what? In the comments here on YouTube, throw whatever word you think suits Jeremiah Smith. Throw it into the comments and let us know. Can we come up with some different words to describe this guy? Because he is unbelievable. Unbelievable. And the fact that in 2 games, he's basically put up 200 yards. He's got, he had 2 touchdowns last week, so a 3rd touchdown now. He's just the score he had in this game where he caught basically the curl route from Will Howard. And I liked they highlighted after the play on the replay how the play design was really well done by Chip Kelly, where he had one receiver, I want to say it was Tate, coming in motion, and it made the corner sort of pause and be like, okay, well, I got to cover this guy. And so that freed Smith up as he kind of cut into the middle of the field to run the curl. He caught it, and the safety got kind of caught over pursuing, slipped up, and Smith was just off to the races. I mean, he's the full package, which we knew kind of coming in because everything, all the talk out of camp was that, he was already this amazing talent that was giving Denzel Burke fits, and people could not contain this guy at practice against a really good Ohio State secondary, mind you. But to see it now on display is something even more special. I understand we just got out of an era where we watched Marvin Harrison Jr. dominate on this team and in this sport for several years in a row consecutively, and we were in awe of him. I'm already at a point where I am in awe of Jeremiah Smith to levels unforeseen. I have never experienced something like this where a guy 2 games into his career as a freshman is just looks like a man amongst boys. I mean, there was people putting out on social media, and I had the take that the day Marvin Harrison Jr. got drafted, he'd be a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. I think you could say that about Jeremiah Smith legitimately right now. Right now, I think Jeremiah Smith could be a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL if he was drafted today. That's how damn good he is. And that play, I think, showed the full package of what he can do because he catches the ball really well. He's got great hands. We know he's super strong, and he also has the speed to just pull away from anybody. I mean, he was stopped, full stop, runs a curl route, catches the ball, and it's just off to the races. Nobody has a chance of stopping him. And that's where the talent discrepancy comes into play for Ohio State. When you're playing a team like Western Michigan, you got a guy like that. There's a big difference in terms of where these two teams are at and the rosters that they have. Jeremiah Smith is the epitome of that. I mean, just another incredible performance for him. I'm hard pressed to. We talked a lot about like what is his ceiling in terms of stats this year. I'm hard pressed to put any sort of cap on what he's going to accomplish this year because 2 games in, we're already seeing incredible things. He's playing like halves of games, and it's only going to get better from here. I can't wait to see him on a grander stage against an Oregon or a Michigan or whatever it might be. And those things will come. Defensively, I think the biggest thing that I took away from tonight, we know, I mean, again, secondary is really good. I felt like they dominated in this game per usual. But the defensive line has been the thing in recent years that I find myself, and similar to the offensive line, not necessarily dominating as much as we hoped in matchups against inferior opponents. Defensive line has been very similar in recent years where we were waiting for somebody to make a play. And it was like, why can't they generate more of a pass rush? Why can't they get more of a push up field and, alter these quarterbacks a little bit more, even against opponents that we felt like they should be beating, frankly. And so I felt like these first 2 weeks, you have seen on full display what this front defensive line for the Buckeyes can do, and it has been a thing of beauty because I think that has been lacking in recent seasons. But you get, it was from everybody. Ty Hamilton had half a sack tonight. I know Cody Simon he got a sack on a blitz at one point tonight. But you had Jack Sawyer on the one play where was it in the second quarter? I think it was in the second quarter where he just got off the ball real quick. Tight end was coming to block him, and he just blew right past the guy and got to the quarterback to make the play on Hayden Wolf, who was their obviously Western Michigan starting quarterback. Like it's every direction now that you're seeing. Tyleik Williams got in the mix for the other half of that sack that he split with Ty Hamilton. You're seeing more and more of those guys, JT Tuimoloau and others, generate the pressure, and it's more consistent than it's been in recent years. That stood out to me, and that was something that I quickly picked up on because, again, I just felt like even in games last year against teams that we thought Ohio State should boat race, they weren't necessarily dominating in the trenches on that side of the ball either. And this year we were all expecting it to be different because of the number of upperclassmen that came back and decided to return to try to chase this championship. So I loved seeing that. I thought there was a couple guys that really impressed me I thought Arvell Reese made a couple really nice plays for the Buckeyes. He got some run, especially later in the game as things kind of wore on. But I was impressed by what he kind of brought to the table. I also just felt like in general, I know that the Denzel Burke, hit was unfortunate, but I kind of looked at the glass half full perspective when it happened, where he got called for the targeting, obviously in the first half, which was, well, Ohio State was already up, I think 21-0 at that point. I was like, is it the worst thing to get Denzel Burke out of here a little earlier than usual and not risk any injuries here or anything? Because they're going to need him obviously down the stretch for bigger matchups than this one. And the game was pretty much felt like it was already in hand at that point. So I was okay with that. And I wasn't too worried about the fact that he had to kind of take a back seat early. But obviously unfortunate that hit was called. The thing that's tough with targeting too, and I was thinking about this, I mean, there's a lot that's wrong with the rule, but the fact that like the running back can lower his head and the DB or the tackler can't do the same. And sometimes it's just like inadvertently how the two kind of collide, that their helmets make contact. That's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate part of the rule, but it is what it is. And like I said, I kind of took the glass half full perspective that it wasn't the end of the world that he had to get out of there and sort of take a back seat for earlier than maybe expected. But yeah, I thought the defense once again dominated, and the fact that they pitched a shutout showed that. I mean, when you leave a game having given up just 99 yards of total offense, I think that speaks for itself. This group is really good. I do think that's almost the next thing I want to see is I'm starting to feel better about the offense and the push that they got tonight. And if the offensive line can build on this from here, great. That's what we're hoping for. Run game was good tonight. But on the defensive side, like now I want to see them get tested by a team with a better offense, which might not come maybe until maybe we can say the Michigan State game is the game where they have a team that has at least somewhat of a better offense. I know Michigan played a tight game, tough game against Maryland today, put up 27 points in a win, an overtime win, I believe it was too. Or no, I think they won at the end of regulation. I take that back. I was thinking of the Duke game last night, the Duke Northwestern game. But yeah, Michigan State wins that one. Maybe that's the first game you get like a better test of an offense against you. Iowa's obviously scored a little bit more this year than they have in previous years, but not, I guess not today. They lost a tight one today to Iowa State, but yeah, I don't think Oregon's going to be the one we know, but I'd like to see them get at least like some tested a little bit by an offense before that Oregon game to feel a little bit better about how they'll handle one of the better, higher ranked teams, a championship caliber team like Oregon when that game comes up on the schedule. And that's why everything for me as we map out this early portion of the schedule is about like, what does this mean for that Oregon game at this point? I'm not trying to say I'm taking anybody lightly. Michigan State, they could always get you if you fall asleep at the wheel. I don't think that's going to happen. Same thing with Iowa if you fall asleep at the wheel. Granted, that game's not in Iowa. It's not at Kinnick Stadium. It's at home, so that makes me feel a little bit better about it. But yeah, like you got to take those games seriously. But I'm trying to take bits and pieces from all these games that go through it and see how Ohio State progresses into being a well-oiled machine so that when the Oregon game finally hits, we feel like that's a game that they have a chance to win and maybe even dominate if they're at that point in terms of what they're able to do. Meanwhile, while Ohio State was getting ready for their nighttime showdown with Western Michigan, a lot was happening around college football and the Big Ten. And this stuff matters, guys. I already mentioned Iowa, 21st ranked team in college football, one of the Big Ten's ranked teams, obviously, and they fall to Iowa State 20-19. Went back to their, scoring under 20 points thing that tends to be the staple of Iowa football. And so they fall in that one 20-19 and likely going to be knocked out of, I would assume, the top 25. They'll be back at some point. Iowa always is. But that wasn't even the worst. That wasn't even the best of it. Penn State, who we know Ohio State seems to own over the years. And this is the moment I think I missed Nick on the show tonight the most, because Penn State and James Franklin struggled to put away Nick Wilson's alma mater in the Bowling Green Falcons tonight or earlier today. And that was stunning because everybody was riding high on Penn State after last week. They go to West Virginia, get the win, and Drew Aller looked pretty good, but they did not look very good for a while. It took to the third quarter for them to even have a lead in the game. Like, not great. Not great for them. And I think, maybe it's early season, feeling some things out, but that was crazy. And I don't know that Penn State looked like a top 10 team in the country today. Obviously, another team that didn't look like a top 10 team in the country, much to our joy and much to our enjoyment, was the Michigan Wolverines, who got blown out as expected at home, 31-12 against Texas. Quinn Ewers, former Ohio State Buckeye. I have a question about him, by the way, which we'll get to in the third segment. Threw for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns and took care of business, disposing of Michigan and handing them a loss here early in the season that obviously they have a chance to come back from, but that certainly looked like they are not on a trail or a path towards repeating as national champions. And we all relished it every second of it. I know we did. I saw the tweets that were out there. Let's just face it. anytime we get to watch Michigan lose, it's a good thing. We hoped it would have happened in the national championship game and they wouldn't have won the title. They get bragging rights until a new champion is crowned, and hopefully it's Ohio State. And then we can just kind of leave the Michigan one in the past. But we still get to laugh at their expense when they lose football games because that's what the rivalry is. And so I very much enjoyed seeing them lose today, as I'm sure many of you did as well. But that's not even the biggest game of the day, because what happened in Notre Dame today was absolutely asinine. And it's why I titled the episode of this podcast, No Upsets in Columbus Tonight, because it seemed like MAC schools were just giving Big Ten teams fits today. Not even Big Ten teams, just teams in general fits today with the Bowling Green performance against Penn State. And then last week, Nick and I talked about a little bit of maybe some worry early on against Akron, where you were only up 7-3 and then 17-3. And then today, you get Northern Illinois knocking off Notre Dame 16-14 in a stunner of a game. The number 5 team in the country goes down to Northern Illinois after everybody was riding high on the Notre Dame train. Everybody was ready to say Notre Dame's going undefeated because they beat Texas A&M last week, and that's it. And here's the problem for Notre Dame. Yes, you can come back from a loss this early in the season, especially in a 12-team playoff era. But their schedule is easy. Very, very easy this year. They don't play all the big name teams that you're sometimes used to seeing them play. They do have USC on there, but Florida State, who's on there, they're obviously they struggled this year. Or they have struggled this year already, off to an 0-2 start. So, I'm looking up and down their schedule, and it's like, man, they really are going to have to accumulate some wins. I know they got Louisville on there, who's 22nd in the country right now. Georgia Tech, who's 23rd, but they just lost to Syracuse today, so that might change. But, that schedule is easy, where they definitely cannot afford another loss along the way, or it truly could cost them a spot in the playoff. I think ultimately Notre Dame will get in, and they'll probably salvage things from here. But, man, does that ramp up the heat on Marcus Freeman. And, man, does that ramp up the pressure on them to try to get themselves now back in the playoffs. Because if you lose to a MAC school like that, and then, by the way, biggest upset in the history of the MAC. Has to be. It has to be. I can't think of another one. When I used to work at the University of Akron part-time, they beat Northwestern in a game, which was a huge deal to Akron at the time and in the MAC at the time. But number 5 team in the country falling to Northern Illinois. I mean, this is a modern-day App State over Michigan. Truly, it is. That is insane. And Notre Dame's got some explaining to do. Marcus Freeman's got some explaining to do. And things are not going well there for the Golden Domers. All right, we take another break as we pause quickly for a quick word from our sponsors. When we get back, the Michigan Panic Meter. How was it affected, or if at all, by the blowout loss today? I have a question about the quarterback that took them down from Texas and Quinn Ewers. And we bring back as our post-game staple, like it, love it, and leave it for the Buckeyes win over Western Michigan. All that and more coming your way here on Sons of the Shoe. Keep it locked, guys. I'll talk to you here in just a minute. Welcome back in. Final segment, Sons of the Shoe, our post-game edition following the 56-0 blowout win for the Buckeyes over Western Michigan. And we always start this segment, especially during the season, with our Michigan Panic Meter, which I want to remind people, the Michigan Panic Meter is not about how much Michigan fans are panicking. It's about how much we, Nick and I collectively, or you, if you guys want to, if you ever want to input your own bar of where you are in the Michigan panic meter, you're more than welcome to do so in the comments section at 92 Through the Fans YouTube channel, or hit us up on social media at Spency2_, whatever. But it is about measuring our collective panic about Michigan as Ohio State fans. And it has wavered a lot throughout the offseason. It obviously wavered a lot last year leading up to that game. I think safely today, after Nick and I were already in the darkest of dark grays, it remains where it is. The darkest of dark grays for the Michigan panic meter. Nobody's worried about them. They just got blown up. Can we laugh? They lost. They lost to Texas at home. The reigning champs already have a loss on their schedule, and we all relished it. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so no change to the Michigan panic meter. It stays where it is. Now, I do want to play you some audio here because after the game today, after the 31-12 win for Texas, Quinn Ewers, who we know infamously came to Ohio State, got the bag, and then departed to go home to Texas and play for the hometown team and the Texas Longhorns, which in some respects, I've always thought Texas as a brand is pretty awesome. So I get that. But at the same time, I don't think today was weird, the conversation around Quinn Ewers. And that's where I want to go with this, because he had some commentary when he was asked about helping out Ohio State today and, doing them a solid by beating their biggest rival. Here's what he had to say after the game.
State has with Michigan, and yeah, I mean, for sure, I understand the rivalry that Ohio State has with Michigan, and to kind of carry that along through the week, and again, I understand how it goes, so it's definitely cool coming back here because the last time I was here, it didn't end up going which team I was on way. To that point, how much?
So that was Quinn Ewers, and I apologize for the delay there in getting the audio to play. I had the music volume dimmed from when I had to dim the intro. Beauties of doing a show by yourself. Anyway, I thought it was interesting because he's really leaned into, Quinn has, this whole his time at Ohio State thing this week, but also just leading up to the season. He had the comments back at SEC Media Day where he was like, yeah, that team up north and whatever. And then he gets asked about it today and sort of very reflectively mentions how when he was here or when he played in Ann Arbor, his 1 year with the Buckeyes, it didn't go their way. And so it felt good to kind of accomplish that. It's interesting. And and this is where the conversations around Quinn Ewers got interesting today on social media from fans, because I always kind of felt that people felt a little bit spurned by Quinn Ewers. Like, it was like, dude, why'd you come here and take the money and run? You could have been the next great Ohio State quarterback. And I think that obviously rubs some people the wrong way. I don't know that I've necessarily I don't have a lot of animosity for Quinn Ewers. I actually like his game. I think he's a really good player. And I respect him, even though he left Ohio State. But it was weird because it felt like we were doing the thing where we try to claim him as an Ohio State guy in the same way we do Joe Burrow. Now, Joe Burrow's different because Joe Burrow actually has a degree from Ohio State. He went back and finished his school there. But it's similar in that it's somebody who was there and now went somewhere else and is having success elsewhere, trying to win a championship, all these different things. And there was a blip on the radar where they were at Ohio State. And so we try to just kind of attach ourselves to them and say that. But it felt like everybody was trying to do that on social media. And that's my point here. Can we claim Quinn Ewers as an Ohio State guy when he spent all of 2 seconds here and basically just robbed the store and took it with him back to Texas to go play for the Longhorns? And listen, again, I don't necessarily hate Quinn Ewers for that. It's whatever. We don't cross. If it had been like him going to Michigan, I probably would feel way more passionately about this. Was it a kind of a bad look? Yeah, of course. I'm not necessarily sitting here like, yay, Quinn Ewers, but I did think it was funny that he played into all the Ohio State narratives and things leading up to the game. And then he references it after the game because he's asked about it. And he's kind of, giving a little wink wink to his former team, and no ill will there, it doesn't seem. And so people seem to eat that up today as they were watching Texas dismantle Michigan, where it was like, hey, we love you, Quinn. You're still our guy. And I don't know that we can claim him. I don't think that works. I'm fine. I said this on the show earlier in the week. Nick was very adamant, like, why are we excited about Quinn Ewers? Blah, 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 blah. And I was basically like, listen, it's him playing against Michigan. I'll go back to not rooting for Texas at all after this week. But it's the fact that he's playing Michigan that I'm going to be in his favor. Like, I want to see him win. I want to see him play well. I want to see him succeed because I want to see Michigan lose. He's now accomplished that, and we can go our separate ways. But it seemed like people were just trying desperately. And maybe it's because we're desperate for something close to Ohio State to feel like it's better than Michigan right now, because we've lost 3 straight years to them. But we were grabbing those coattails of Quinn Ewers and holding on for dear life today, touting how much we love him and how great it was to see him. And you'll always be a Buckeye to us. I saw people putting out there. It was wild. I did not expect that today. I expected people to be like, good for Quinn, good for Texas. And it's always fun to see Michigan lose. I did not expect people to sort of lean into the idea that we can somehow claim Quinn Ewers. I don't think it works that way. Joe Burrow at least makes some sense. Quinn Ewers, guys, he was here for like 5 seconds. He lasted all of a couple months here in Columbus. I can't do the Joe Burrow thing with Quinn Ewers. It doesn't work. But maybe you disagree. Let me know in the comments at the 92 to the Fan YouTube channel. All right, final portion of the show here. As we do during the regular season, we like to do a segment we call Like It, Love It, and Leave It. And it's basically taking a couple different things from the game that unfolded that we're talking about and recapping here with you. And we find something we like, we find something we love, and we find something that they should leave behind for that game specifically and never bring it back again. So I start you off with my Like It for the night, which goes back to the top of the show. The offensive line play, just phenomenal. I thought all around. I thought it was a really good game plan by Chip Kelly. And I thought that group exuded themselves in a way that I hadn't seen, even against inferior opponents, where I'm starting to feel more confident about what this group can do and that they can be a more physical team and when it really counts and when it really matters. And so I'm encouraged by the performance from that group tonight. But it was the thing that I noted as my Like It for tonight. Another note here in the Like It category, we got the debut of Julian Sayin tonight, and he looked good. He threw a touchdown pass. It was a really nice one. He was 2 for 2, 61 yards and a score, hooking up with Bennett Christian for the touchdown. Just saying. It was nice to get a little taste of what the Julian Sayin era could look like. And that's another thing that these early season games matter, I think, for, because next year, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but next year we'll be having a conversation about Julian Sayin as the potential next quarterback for Ohio State when Will Howard obviously goes off to probably the NFL. But Aaron Nolan's there, Lincoln Keenholz will maybe still be there. And so to get these guys reps in meaningful games and kind of get a taste of what the future holds and get them that experience does matter longer term down the line here. So I was encouraged by that. I was glad that we got that. I like that. My Love It for the night. How about Ryan Day going for it on 4th down on 2 separate occasions, and one of them I really loved because, and I'm trying to pull up the exact drive here. I know it was in the 3rd quarter, but there was one drive where he went for it on 4th down. All right, I found it here. It was the second series they had of the 3rd quarter, because the first series they basically went 3 and out, didn't really do much, and it was kind of disappointing because you could tell they kept the starters out there. They were trying to kind of hit the ground running. show what it's going to look like coming out of the half and trying to score immediately when you get the ball. And they kind of failed on that. And so I thought it was good to see him be aggressive on the second series that also could have ended with a punt. Or, I mean, you were at the Western Michigan 38, so maybe a field goal or a punt, depending on what you want to do there. But he pressed the pedal down. 4th and 8 was the where they were at. It was a longer 4th down, and they ran a nice play. Will Howard hooked up with Brandon Innis, 19 yards, set them up where Trayvon Henderson then scored 2 plays later on a 16-yard run, and that was his touchdown for the night. I thought it was good to see, because how many times do we come on this postgame show and say, well, Ryan Day puckered up again when he needed it most, and he was afraid to do some things. These games are your test run for those types of moments. These games are your chance to really show in tight situations what you're going to do, how you're going to handle it, what the play calls are going to be. I thought it was great that he's already trying some of those things and being aggressive in certain moments already early in the season. So I liked that, or I love that, excuse me. As for leaving it, the only thing I could come up with in a game that was this dominant, really, that Will Howard underthrow. Got to be better on that one specifically. And this isn't me trying to rip Will Howard to get out of here and end the show. I already talked about him earlier. I think he's proven to me already that he brings more to the table than I think Kyle McCord did, even though I know Kyle McCord's doing his thing out at Syracuse, and I'm sure Nick and I will talk about that this week. But that was a bad one, and one you wish you had back, and one that will stick with people if he's doing it in a different game. Like if the opponent is different, obviously we feel worse about that than we do tonight when you blow a team out 56-0. But those are the types of passes that we're expecting him to make in big moments. And so that was the one thing that I would like to leave here in the Western Michigan game. How about you guys? What is your like it, love it, and leave it for Ohio State's 56-0 win over Western Michigan tonight? You can let us know on X at Spencito_, or at the 92 to the Fan YouTube channel in the comments section. Either are fine, as we also encourage you to like, follow, subscribe, and find Sons of the Shoe wherever you get your podcasts, especially at Apple Podcasts. That's always a good space to tune in. By the way, guys, before I get out of here, because for the listening audience that catches this at a later time, I am recording this live, and Oregon currently trailing Boise State at halftime 20-14. Just saying, could we be in for another upset? It won't happen until early Sunday morning, but could we be in for another week? What week are we in? Week 2, because this is week 0. Week 2 upset. We'll see. Might have something else to talk about on next week's midweek show. Appreciate you guys as always. We will be back with our midweek show previewing the matchup with, well, I don't know if we'll preview the matchup with Marshall too much this week, because we'll have another week to do that, obviously with Ohio State being idle next weekend. But we'll certainly talk about this one, talk about some things that we saw, what kind of lies ahead, and I'm very much excited to get back to it with you. Until that time, thank you guys as always, and go Bucks.